Welcome to 2023. It's the SMC Journal podcast. I am Scott Moore, your host. Thank you for being with us today. This is the show where we're talking about systems engineering, performance engineering, DevOps, site reliability, observability, aiops, security, and much, much more. That's right. We've expanded our topic range for 2023, and we have so much more to talk about this year. I want to thank two groups of people right off the bat. First, are you, the viewers, who have given me so much good feedback over the last year, but in the past recent weeks, even through the holidays just recently, a lot of attaboys and, hey, Scott, we love your show. We love your content. We're subscribing. I've seen the subscriber rate go up quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, and I'm really appreciative. I mean, I'm getting some feedback that I'm doing the right thing, so I'm excited about this year and bringing you more great content. And the goal this year is to expand the number of eyeballs that see this podcast and see some of the content that we're producing so they can enjoy and benefit from it as well. The second group of people I like to think are my sponsors, made up of great individuals. And one of my big sponsors for this year is the same one for last year, and that's Micro Focus, the makers of LoadRunner Professional, Enterprise, and Cloud, and Developer. Don't forget about Developer. I've been using LoadRunner for over 25 years, almost 30 years now. Great tool and one of the leading load testing tools on the market. They have one of the largest communities out there. You can scan that QR code, check out some videos in their product. You can download the product and get the community edition and get 50 virtual users as well. And they continue to be a major sponsor this year, as well as Bright Payment Solutions, brighteps.com. You know, Dave Humphrey and his group of highly qualified individuals that handle point of sale systems. If you've got a store, you have, whether it's online or whether it's some retail store that you sell retail stuff, and you've got to think about saving money saving money on credit card transactions, basically. That's what Dave and his team know how to do the best. Contact them at brighteps.com. Tell them Scott Moore sent you. They will definitely treat you right. And I'm looking forward to working with him and taking many credit card transactions through Bright this year. And also his production team for video production and marketing are the ones that help me with a lot of the videos that I make. So when you see some of the really good, cool parody stuff and all that, they probably had something to do with it. So thank you again. So let's get right into this show because we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. You've probably seen, like I have on your feed, all the companies that are putting out the top predictions for blah, blah, blah in this area of IT. And you don't have time to go through all that stuff. Let me be your filter today. I've been through over 25 of these articles and read through them, scanned through, and I've taken out all the junk and all the stuff that we know is not even worth looking at. And I've come up with some what I think are some good, I wouldn't call them predictions. I would call them maybe trends that I think we're going to see in 2023. And I'll give some references as some kudos as to some people that I picked up some good tips from about this. So let's get, some of the predictions in these articles will look silly in 6 months, and maybe mine will too. Some of them already look silly, and we're in just the first week or so of January of the year. But that's the way it always works. I mean, when you get these, year-end summary for year blah, 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 and predictions for, but it's a free marketing tool. The marketing company needs to fill that quota, and this is always an easy win for them is, let's get some talking heads to talk about what's new. Well, I'm going to be one of those today. Let's see how good I'm doing. So I've got a little presentation that I'm even going to share with you to make it all fancy pants on you. Let's talk about what I call the systems engineering trends for 2023, and we'll start with AI. So what do I think about this? You cannot get around the fact that everybody's talking about ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E, and all of this. It's all of a sudden it's been out there, but now everybody's been talking about it. This ChatGPT where you go in and say, write me a 150-word LinkedIn article that will go viral, and it produces some soulless content. But it's useful. It is very useful. There's some really cool stuff you can do with it. We would call that generative AI, and that is the rage. We've also heard that Google is now in panic mode because of this. Bing has announced that they're going to incorporate that into their browser. Canva is integrating text to image built on generative AI into the Canva product. And these are regular user applications. This is not just IT people using this. This is a general population that would use something like Search and Canva. You're going to see more and more of this over the next year, as if all of a sudden it dropped out of the sky. We've been working on this. IT has been working on this, and startups have been working on this for years. But now all of a sudden it's a big thing, and we saw the fastest amount of users accessing, in other words, as a subscription, like logging in and creating accounts, to be 1 million for ChatGPT than any other application. The fastest to 1 million I think we've ever seen. It was like a couple of days, maybe, or a week or something. And everybody's out there creating all these cool images. But now let's bring that back to IT. How can we utilize that same technology in the things that we do as systems engineers? For 2020, I think you're going to see more talk about this for things like enhancing the analysis that comes out of load testing tools, and enhancing the analysis and trending that comes out of observability products, more preventative maintenance. We've already seen some of this with products like aiops and StormForge, which we've covered in this show last year, but I think you will see more and more about it. And you're going to see a combination of better enablement of low code, no code solutions, and the more efficient use of DevOps in reducing toil faster. You will hear a term called hyper automation from Gartner, and that's typically around RPA, applying this AI ML around RPA as an automation technique. The SD Times goes as far as to say that low-code solutions without AI built into them, you might as well consider them dead, but that DevOps will embrace this low-code with AI, a smart no-code solution that will begin to adopt it in 2023. And I will talk a little bit about why that is. But remember, no-code solutions, there's code, you just can't control it. Okay, that's my take on it. But I think that's where we're going with AI and machine learning in 2023. Hopefully that made sense to you. What's the next item up for bid? This is the year of the supercloud. Now, I have been following David Linthicum. I hope I'm pronouncing his name properly. If I'm not, David, call me. You have like 197,000 followers on LinkedIn. How do you even get that much? You work for Deloitte. I used to work for Deloitte. We're buddies. I've tried to reach out to you. You won't contact me back. I'd love to have you on the show. Talks about cloud a lot and is being published a lot. Supercloud, metacloud, multi-cloud, whatever you call it, it's coming, and some of it is already here. But what David talks a lot about, and what he's been mentioning recently, is that cloud vendors are pretty much going to have to create an ecosystem of what he calls IT stacks. Now, that's made up of the things that operations does, security, data integration. I'm sure testing is part of that as well. This stack of this ecosystem needs to work between the cloud vendors, or what he calls the hyperscalers, right? So between Azure and Google Cloud and Rackspace and Amazon, we need a layer of services that make application deployment to these seamless. Now, what that looks like, I don't know, but it's technically called cross-cloud abstraction. We're abstracting all those things that we're doing right now inside of Azure and AWS to set up all these services, create VMs and containers, and deploy K8s. And there needs to be an abstraction above that that makes it simpler and easier to do. And maybe one day we'll be able to deploy an application and not even care which cloud it's going to, because it's going to all of them, so that if the North American region goes down for AWS for 30 minutes, God forbid, which we know has somewhat happened before, it doesn't matter, because we got 4 other cloud providers and our own private thing going on too. It's kind of like a home user having Xfinity Comcast as a internet service provider, but they also have Starlink and a cellular modem router, all load balanced between them, so that if one has a bad day, the other ones might pick up. Maybe they're self-hosting something. Not that I would know anything about that in my own home lab, but that's a different conversation. The year of the supercloud also means that that's more complex, which means there should be more testing. And the biggest thing about that is it's to improve resilience. So I think that will mean resilience engineering will be a term. I think you will stop hearing a lot about chaos engineering because I don't think that is a great, that term hasn't been received very well by the CFOs and the CEOs of the world. You're going to do what with chaos on my production application and mine? It doesn't, but resilience, it's important to have a resilient application. How do you do that? How do you create a workflow around that? Can you automate resilience? Can you bring toil out of your application while building resilience in a multi-cloud situation? Start thinking about that. Companies, we have begun seeing companies move away from the cloud back to enterprise data centers. Why? Apparently, nobody wants to admit this, somebody made a mistake. What was that mistake? Not understanding what the workloads would be in the cloud, not understanding how resilient an application needed to be, relying on one cloud vendor. And oh yeah, there's that big thing called the cost of something. The big deal that I'm seeing is that the outage rates, even after moving to the cloud, have not really changed significantly. In fact, a company called Uptime released a 2022 data center resiliency survey, and I've got a link to that on the site, says that 80% of data centers have experienced some type of outage in the last 36 months, even after moving to the cloud, which is actually 10% higher than it's been in the past. So what say you? Got to have multi-cloud, we got to have supercloud, and it needs to be easy to deploy it across multiple clouds. I agree with David Linthicum. That's coming. It should already be here. Next up, observability. You guessed it. Yes, you notice I've been talking a lot more about observability because that's where most of you are living right now. You're moving away from APM and just static environments and monitoring to solving new problems with metrics, logs, traces, events, and the things associated with observability. I believe around this, you will begin to hear about an even a newer term called, it's a category called digital experience monitoring. Now, I would call that end user experience. That's the thing that my whole performance tour show is really based on, is how do we get to a good end user experience from a performance standpoint? But the experience of your end users, the users of your end product, what is their experience? It needs to be delightful, right? How do we get there? Whether we are looking at things from a machine level or from the actual end user level, like seeing what they're actually doing, we need to observe that. So observability from an end user experience level is digital experience monitoring, DEM. And Gartner actually has a whole magic quadrant around there. There are players in that space, and we're actually going to have an episode solely on digital experience monitoring in the next couple of weeks. You will see observability now focused less on, which is always important, it's always be there, how many CPUs, what they're doing, what the percentages are they queued, are you leaking memory, all the infrastructure counters there. But you will see an increased focus on efficiency and controlling costs because, like I said, we're seeing companies move away from the cloud because they didn't anticipate the cost. A lot of that cost has to do with so much data that's being ingested and put into the cloud in this never-ending growing data lake that's becoming a data swamp. And to reduce that, we have to have tools like Cribble or an edge-based technology to start filtering out a lot of that data and say, hold on a second, before we actually send that to the cloud, is this something we actually really need? Or maybe we need a trickle of information unless we see some type of bad behavior or a pattern we don't like, then open up the floodgates, give me more information until we can get a resolution to that problem. That way we can save on the cost of ingesting all of that extra data that may not be as useful to us. So you're going to begin seeing edge processing for not only just CDNs, but anything where we're pulling in data or utilizing data. If it can be handled at the edge, you can save money and not have it in the cloud and have some workflow and rules around that. I think you will see more about, and that's what observability is going to be utilized more for. Not only that, but another kind of efficiency, which is power usage efficiency. We're hearing not only that is it probably the right thing to do, it's the necessary thing to do because we have entire countries with power issues. We're just consuming a lot of power today. Now, more modern server architecture and infrastructure is much more power efficient. If you buy a MacBook Pro today with those M1 processors in them, they're going to be a lot more efficient than the ones that you bought 5 years ago that were made by Intel or whoever. But you will see more and more emphasis on getting the most bang out of and the most value out of your applications and your infrastructure. Yeah, I want 3-second timings, but I don't want to run 5 times the amount of power to get that if I don't have to. Another thing that I will give Nick Hudecker of Cribble a hat tip on this. He spoke in a recent end of year streaming podcast about the fact that open telemetry as it relates to observability really still isn't finished. The CNCF still has a lot of things in draft right now, but you have various observability platform vendors saying, oh, we have full support for open telemetry. We can support everything that's out there, but even some of the stuff that's in draft, they're kind of having to take and makeshift and put their own little things around it, which deviates from standardization. So if you're dealing with multiple observability vendors and they both are implementing their own version of some piece of open telemetry that's not finished, you're going to run into integration issues. The standards just aren't done. For example, logs right now are still in draft. So we're going to find out if Nick's right about that. I got another prediction that he made that I want to include in here about security, but that was a very interesting episode, and I do have a link to that. I encourage you to listen to that. Next topic up for bid, DevOps. You guessed it. Scott Moore is talking about DevOps. Can you believe it? I actually believe you will start hearing more about not just DevOps, DevSecOps, or DevSecQAOps, or whatever. I think you'll start hearing more about BizDevOps as a mainstream terminology, meaning making the business part of the context on how technology impacts the business itself, which I think has been needed for a while. So just think about that that's what I've been talking about, which is why digital experience monitoring really has me excited about where we're going with observability. The companies that are utilizing observability appropriately and getting the most value out of them are those who can take the information that comes out of that platform and bridge it to business context. How is this affecting the business? And those developers, those technical mindsets that haven't been able to do that in the past, you're going to have to start doing that. You're going to have to start understanding how what you do on an everyday basis affects the end user and the business and how it's run. If you can't do that, I think you're going to be at a disadvantage. Platform engineering will be a thing in 2023, whether you want it to be or not. Over the last 6 months, we've been hearing some campaigns about DevOps being dead. Long live platform engineering. It was a great marketing tool. DevOps is not going to die. DevOps is really still in its infancy. And I think that a better way to explain it is that platform engineering will help DevOps move into maturity. And let me explain that. Right now, what we're hearing all over the market is burnout. Developer burnout. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that over the course of building a DevOps culture, everybody said, and it's including the DevOps guru consultants, developers, you should be self-sufficient on and be able to do everything. Just control everything, write your own code, create your own environments, do everything. And when it gets over here to production, then operations will start observing it, and we'll do some things over here. But make your own environments, do all that stuff. So developers have taken more and more on their plate, and we're seeing the burnout from that, and being on call with the environments that you created because it's your stuff. I don't think that's a long-term solution, and I think platform engineering is a way to take that cognitive fatigue, if you will, and try to make the developer's experience better, give them the tools that they need at the ready so that they can spend time writing code. I think platform engineering will be defined as something that enables developers and makes administration and environments easier to deal with so they can focus on their code. Now, I have to reference Victor Farsick, the DevOps Toolkit master on YouTube. He did a video a couple of weeks about this, and I do have the link on that for it, where he gives a really great explanation about how all this took place with DevOps as we went through the agile years, and then DevOps was a way to break down these silos between developers and operations, and what did the DevOps consultants and the gurus say, and then how that worked and what didn't work. I would highly recommend that you check out that video. This is a picture of Victor talking about that on his video. There, if you scan that QR code, you'll actually go to that video where it's the DevOps guru saying you need to do everything, and apps are going, no, that's not the way to do it. And there's other ways to break down those silos. And I think platform engineering is probably the way to do that, but it's a vehicle to get to a more mature DevOps, in my opinion. So that's all that I'll say about that, because I think Victor has said everything that needed to be said about that. A couple of other things in the realm of DevOps that I'll mention. You will hear the term API simulation a little bit more than you've heard it before. It's really the same thing as service virtualization that we've heard in the past, but you may be hearing more about it because APIs have been the target of some recent hacks, and that's how some of these hackers have gotten into the applications versus going through other means. So APIs are going to need to go under more stringent testing, and that means we need to start virtualizing those APIs, simulating those APIs so we can do more and thorough testing on them. I think that will be a good focus for developers and QA this coming year. Everything as code will continue to mature. There will be more things as code that you haven't heard of as code before. As Kubernetes continues its maturity and container-based applications continue their phenomenal growth, everything will be as code, and that it will be the way things get done. That's as much as I'll say about that, because I mean, it's been happening, but it's continuing to happen. It's just increasing the pace. Web3 is one where I will take exception to some of the prediction articles. So there were a few that said, hey, DevOps is finally going to adopt blockchain this year, and all these newer programming languages that are coming out that make Web3 possible, yeah, it's going to be a big deal. I'm not so convinced about that. I think there's still too much smoke and mirrors around this, and I think there's too many recent articles about the failure of cryptocurrency, which is always related to blockchain in people's minds. And Bitcoin and blockchain have always been, even though they're separate things. I don't think it's going to be taken seriously by the enterprise. And we've actually seen, blockchain was supposed to be a miracle for supply chain management. And we've seen some of the bigger vendors for that begin to start dropping off support for that and kind of saying, yeah, maybe blockchain isn't the answer. Maybe it's just a database, or maybe properly using it. So I think Web3, I've actually seen a couple of people posting about maybe we should change the name of Web3. I think that might actually be a good idea. And maybe we'll see if it'll resurface as another name next year. Last but certainly not least, let's talk about security. Yes, we will be talking about that on the show this year. I think you will see this use of AI and machine learning as part of a war going on between smarter threats, worse ransomware attacks, and the good guys competing with that. And we're going to find out who wins. Now, this is, again, where I'm going to quote Nick Hudecker of Cribble. Cribble predicts that the cost of these ransomware attacks that we're going to see within the next year are going to be 10 times the cost of all natural disasters combined. And it's a big statement. What do you think about that? I mean, it could be, but yeah, all we need is one really, really bad one like we haven't seen. Just in the past month or so, we've heard about Twitter, 200 million accounts, I think, leaked information. And LastPass, if you're going to have a security breach, the worst security breach you can have is a password manager. So now people don't trust password manager applications now, and people are wanting to self-host things like Bitwarden, me included. So I think that security will be one of the biggest drivers of IT spending when you're trying to reduce the cost of your cloud spending. I think that spending is going to be redirected towards security, in my opinion. So that is my rundown of predictions for 2023. And I have broken down all the articles that I reference on this show into AI, cybersecurity, DevOps, observability, automation, cloud, data predictions, digital twin predictions, IT infrastructure trends, technology and enterprise trends, and I've even referenced some QA stuff out there from our good friend Joe Colantonio and Test Guild. So I would recommend that you check that out as well. So what do you think about these predictions? Do you think I'm right? Am I wrong? Am I full of hooey? Only you can decide. But you know what you could do about that? If you don't agree, give me some feedback. You can reach me on my website at scottmoore.consulting. And LinkedIn and Twitter. There's my handle. And if you like this type of information, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Consider hitting the like button. It helps me a lot, and it helps that algorithm as well. You can always email me at help@scottmoore.consulting, and I would love to hear from you if I can get my head above my email address. You will notice a lot of changes, little tweaks that will be happening. You notice I'm kind of looking up. I've got the camera moved for this episode. We'll be moving the camera around as we get our stuff situated in the studio. You'll see our resident agent 503 making sure that everything's going well behind me. He'll be changing outfits a lot, as well as our stack of stuff, our rack of stuff will be changing rapidly as well per episode. But we're going to get the camera angles right, the lighting right, and all that stuff. And you're going to see new graphics. You're going to see a lot of stuff on the show. So let me get back to this. So you'll see that in the coming weeks. And I really, really do want to hear from you on this feedback, because as we take this new direction, I'm taking a little bit of a risk running out here on this, but I want to be your weatherman when it comes to a lot of the stuff, these topics that we're talking about. Where do we think the market's going? What's the hot topics that people are talking about? And really, I want to get through all of the marketecture and what I call the smoke and the mirrors. Let's get to the serious stuff. Where does this stuff really count? Where does it really provide value? That's what I want to provide to you, because I know you don't have time to do that. You're out there doing work. So thank you for spending all of this time with me today and going through this. And we'll love to hear from you. We'll see you in a week on the next podcast. But for this SMC Journal episode, this is Scott Moore saying thanks again for watching, and bye-bye.